primary goal of every cow-calf producer is to raise as many superior calves as possible. Accomplishing this goal has been difficult, however, because superior cows could have only one calf per year. With the development of embryo transfer, it is now possible to have several calves from the same cow in one calf crop.
Okay, so basically, sinabi lang niya what's the difference between ET and AI, no? So yung sa, with AI, you are maximizing the bull, but with ET, you are maximizing the dam. So okay. So in very progressive operations, you do both, especially if you have really elite sire and bulls. Usually in a farm, we do not raise the bulls anymore, no? So we just get the semen straws. So we do AI instead of the natural mating. And then to maximize our elite cows, then we do embryo transfer.
Estrus, the period of time when the female is receptive to breeding, achieved with synchronized injections of FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone. This
Okay. In preparation for the embryo transfer, you have to prepare two types of animals. You have your donor, which is where the embryo will be coming from. And then you have your recipient, no? Where you will be transferring your embryos. So there are two types of embryo transfer. You have the fresh transfer, wherein on the day where you harvested the embryos, you're going to transfer them immediately, yes, after 30 minutes. After processing the embryos, then you're going to transfer them to the recipients on the same day. So that means you are not going to preserve your embryos. And the next or the second type of embryo transfer is the direct transfer. So meaning you will be transferring or implanting the embryos on another day. So you have to cryopreserve them. Okay. But before that, whether you do the fresh transfer or the direct transfer, you have to do estrosynchronization of your um of your of your dam, of your donor, and then of your recipient, especially for the fresh transfer, no? So it will involve injections of several hormones, and there's already a protocol for that. You just follow it, no? And that for the direct transfer, which is when you have your embryos cryopreserved, so you will be doing the Easter synchronization for the recipients at a later time. And to the point that it should just coincide with the mm, the estrus, the stage of the embryo should coincide with the day of the estrus where you will do the embryo transfer. Okay, I hope you get that.
hormone stimulates each ovary to release as many as 7 or more eggs.
Okay, so it's important to do this step for the donors because if not for superovulation, you will not be able to get many embryos from the super dam. And that's the reason why you're doing the embryo transfer. No? You want to maximize, you want to get as much embryos from the dam. Without superovulation, you are just going to get one, at most two, no? So it defeats the purpose of doing the embryo transfer kasi you're not getting as many as you want from the super dam.
12 hours after standing estrus, the donor cow is artificially inseminated. Due to the large number of eggs to be fertilized, 2 straws of semen are used. Only 1 straw would be used in a typical AI situation. Then, 7 days after estrus, the donor cow is flushed and the embryos are collected.
So this is the collecting receptacle or the collecting embryo cup. So you have your embryos there at the bottom, no? Or it's simply actively being filled up. So some are probably floating. Okay. And there's a filter at the bottom. Um, yeah, there's a filter, and that's where you will have your embryos. Okay, so this is just ano ba yun? Flushing medium. Okay, but this is a special flushing medium because it has FSH, no? We cannot use intravenous fluids, no? For embryo transfer processing. But we do intravenous fluid therapy for the donors when we are doing embryo harvesting.
Dr. Clifford Dorn of Rafter D Genetics has been performing embryo transfers for 13 years and will demonstrate and discuss the procedure.
We begin the embryo collection process by administering the epidural anesthesia, locating the junction between the sacrum and the first sacral vertebra. We can inject the lidocaine or the anthocane into the vertebral fossa. We elevate the tail for just a few seconds to ensure that the liquid stays within the fossa. This anesthesia will act to knock out the rectal contractions and to actually deaden the reproductive tract. We now palpate the animal and wash off the vulva and perineal region with water. Once we have thoroughly washed the area, we will use a paper towel to soak up any excess fluid. Now the assistant will hand me the catheter, spread the vulva so that we can actually enter into the vagina without contaminating the catheter.
Ito si doctor, hindi gumamit ng tip nung sa AI, no? May assistant pa siya. So, the Foley catheter is not as hard as the AI gun. So, this one is very flexible. That's why trying to insert the Foley catheter inside the uterus is very difficult. And imagine that the cow is not in heat, no? It's 7 days after the cow was inseminated. So the cervix is closed, okay? So the catheter will go over the many cervical plugs, cervical ridges,
and slowly pass the catheter through the cervix into the body of the uterus. Once we get into the uterus, we need to slide the catheter all the way up into one uterine horn. The technician will assist me by inflating the balloon with air. Once the balloon is inflated, that channel is clamped with the pair of hemostats.
Okay, it appears, it's as if this step is very easy, but in real life, no, it's very difficult to insert the Foley catheter up to the uterine horn. Okay, you have to have that arm muscle power to manipulate the reproductive tract. You have to have that endurance, no, to be able to stand up for a very long time in doing this procedure. Okay. At this point, no, you will really need an assistant because the assistant will help keep the catheter in place and will insert the syringe in the in the other opening of the Foley catheter to inflate the balloon at the end, no? The balloon will keep the catheter in place in the fallopian tube. So you will try to insert the catheter as close to the end of the uterine horn as nearest to the fallopian tube as possible, so that the embryo that will be harvested will be collected and will pass through the catheter as soon as possible, no? So they will not end up being left in the uterine horn. So it is expected that if you put your catheter as close to the uterine horn, your success rate is higher. Okay. And you also have your hemostat forceps to clip on the catheter, no? So that the balloon will not get deflated during the time that you're doing the harvest.
The stylet can then be removed.
So the stylet is the one that's giving the like it 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 poses as the skeleton of the Foley catheter. So it will be easier for the technician to insert the catheter inside, no? Otherwise, without the stylet, it will be very wobbly and it will be difficult to insert it. It's like when you're putting IV cannula, di ba? It has to have the needle so that you can insert it in the vein. Without the needle, you cannot do it. No, so that's the same principle.
The stylet is placed back into the sterile bag so that it can be used when we place the catheter into the second uterine horn. Now the assistant will attach the tubing. The wide junction of the tubing fits right into the back side of the Foley catheter. We now have a completely closed system.
Okay. When you remove the stylet, it will then be possible for you to insert the tip of the wide tube, diba? If you have the stylet, you cannot insert the wide tube because there's something inside. Okay.
It's important that all the feces be removed from the rectum in order to assure ease of palpation.
Okay. At this point, your balloon is already inflated on the inside, no? And by gravity, no, this one is a little bit heavy when you try to insert the wide tube here. So if your balloon is not properly inflated, so usually it's 8 ml when you 8 cc of air that you inflate. You also don't want to overinflate, okay? If you do not inflate properly, kunyari 6, no? The 5, the Foley catheter will slip. So again, your success rate will be affected kasi it moved backwards, okay? Over time, no, you will try to massage the reproductive tract, no? So it will be bombarded talaga with the pressure of the air coming in and coming out. So your balloon should really be inflated properly so it will stay in place.
At this point, the inlet is open and the fluid is flowing into the right uterine horn. Now we will clamp off the inflow and open the outflow. The fluid will then travel down the outflow tube and enter the embryo filter.
So we were doing a different setup. We have a graduated cylinder instead of this chamber. And we use a petri dish like embryo filter, not like this embryo filter cup, no? And we put the embryo filter, the petri dish like embryo filter on top of the graduated cylinder. So we put a tape on it so it will stay there on top. It will not topple down, no? And then at the top of the embryo cylinder is the an outlet where you can put in your tube like this one here, okay? And the fluid that will be kept inside, no, would be the ones with the embryo, and those that will be filtered out of the water, you can just throw it later on.
As the fluid begins to fill the embryo filter, the technician can open the clamp on the bottom of the filter and allow it to drain off. As the fluid drains down, there's a filter screen across the bottom of this cup, which prevents the embryos from traveling out. It's important that we maintain a level of fluid in the filter. We do not want the filter to run dry, and we do not want it to overflow. As the fluid is flowing into the embryo filter, we will use rectal palpation to massage the tip of the uterine horn. The embryos are out near the junction between the uterus and the oviduct itself. Once the fluid exits the uterus, we will clamp the outflow, open the inflow, and allow fluid to flow back in. Note that the bag of fluid is elevated above the animal's back so that we can use gravity flow to infuse the uterus. Once it's filled, we clamp, open the outflow, and again massage the fluid back out. This procedure is repeated several times until approximately 500 milliliters of solution has been washed through the uterus.
Okay. So we have a flushing medium of 1 liter. So we will use half for one horn and the other on the other horn. So you know when you can stop. If using a graduated cylinder, it's better, no? In my experience, because you already know how much of the fluid that you were already able to use up, because you can track, no, in the graduated cylinder. As compared to this one that they're just throwing away the filtered flushing medium in the floor. So they wouldn't know how much they were already able to consume. Although, in the bag where you have your flushing medium, you can also see, no, because it's also graduated. So you can see if you're already near the 500 mark, so you know when to stop flushing one horn. Over the time that you're doing this, no, you have to massage the uterine horn because there might be some embryos that have already attached on the wall, right? So you try to detach that by massaging it.
This volume is usually sufficient to ensure that all of the embryos have been recovered. After we complete flushing on the right uterine horn, the tubing will be removed, capped back off. The air will be removed from the balloon, and the catheter will be retracted from the reproductive tract. Care should be taken that sterility of the catheter is maintained at all times. The stylet is clamped back into position in the catheter. Then the catheter is reinserted into the uterus. This time we will slide the catheter up into the left uterine horn in approximately the same position as we did for the right side. The same procedure now follows. When the procedure is complete and both horns are effectively flushed, the catheter is then removed and the fluid is drained back through the tubing. A small amount of fluid is then flushed from the bag through the tubing to help rinse out any fluid that's left in the tubing. At this point, the embryo filter can be removed and taken into the laboratory, washed into a dish, and then the embryos can be identified. Once in the laboratory, the embryo filter needs to be removed from the tubes. We then drain this fluid off the bottom until we have an extremely low level of fluid left in the filter. The top is then removed.
So it's possible that the technician who collects the embryo will also be the one to process the embryos. It's just very tiring, but it's possible. But in some research groups, no, they already have like laboratory personnel to do the processing, so that the veterinarian, no, usually it's the veterinarian, but sometimes they also have non-veterinarians to do the embryo transfer, embryo harvest. But in the States, it's strictly being done by veterinarians. Okay. So when you have your laboratory personnel doing the processing, the veterinarian can already rest, because sometimes there are also other animals to be collected at a later time within the day.
we carefully rinse off the filter screen. It is very important that a firm stream of solution is used to rinse the filter, removing all of the debris and mucus which may be attached to the filter. The dish can now be placed on the microscope and searched for the embryos.
So this is a stereo microscope because you have to observe, you have to check that all sides of the embryo are intact, no? Otherwise, even with just slight damage, you have to grade the embryo lower, no? Because there's a grading, A, B, C, D, E, and then there's also a number depending on the stage of the development of the embryo. And there's only, of course, you just want to use the embryos with a grade A and with a stage of early blastocyst to morula stage. You know, the best is the morula stage when you want to transfer it to the recipients.
We use a dissecting microscope to identify the embryos. The searching objective is usually around 10x magnification. Using the holding solution which we prepared earlier, we will now fill up a 6-well dish.
Okay, so this is a stereo microscope which just uses 10x magnification. So it's just very wide, no? There's no need for you to go into 100x. Okay, just 10x and then 40x would be enough, no? Majority 10x lang. So at this point, the medium is still flushing medium, but then you have to transfer, once you have located them, you have to transfer them to another petri dish that is with 4 or 6 wells. And then you have to put the embryo holding medium, so which is another medium. And you have a filter in your syringe because you really want to keep the embryo and the embryo's environment as aseptic as possible. Okay.
By inserting the solution through the sterile filter. We then identify the lid of the dish with the cal number.
Yeah, and you can also now try to separate with the many wells. You can put it like grade A, grade B, no? Or onto the stage, early blastocyst, morula stage, ganon. So at least you are now able to sort it out.
The embryos are loaded into the 1/4 cc straws in 3 bands. The first band strictly contains solution, the second band contains the embryo, and the final band contains another small amount of solution.
Okay, so the way to load the embryo is different if you're going to do fresh transfer or direct transfer. So there's already a protocol for that. So after you have sorted your embryos and then you grade them, right? So if you have any embryos that is grade C or grade B, you may want to do the fresh transfer at the same day if you have recipients prepared, no? Because we only cryopreserve embryos that are grade A and grade B. For grade C and below, they cannot be frozen, okay? So it's really better that when you do fresh embryo harvesting, you also prepare some recipients because you can never say, no, how many and you can never really tell the quality of the embryos that you will be harvesting. Now, what if you harvested all letter B or letter C? No, so you cannot do direct transfer later on, no? And when we have, like, for example, Cs, so we load 2 embryo grade C for fresh transfer, no? These are some of the strategies that we do in to be able to maximize, no, the harvest that we got. For letter B, we can opt to freeze 2 letter B, no, in 1 cement straw. And then for letter A, usually just one lang kasi, 1 embryo is very precious. So just 1 embryo for 1 straw and to be frozen. The order of the air, order of the embryo solution, no, it's very important. So you just follow the protocol. So this is one of the procedures that I really learned that I cannot modify, no. What is in the protocol, you just follow it so that you will have a higher success rate when you do embryo transfer and embryo harvest.
Once we have all of the embryos loaded into the straws, we can place the straws back into a sterile bag for transport.
So see, the embryos are not very much affected with the changes in temperature as compared to the spermatozoa. They are more stable in terms of temperature. But that is if they have not been frozen yet, no? But if you want to freeze them, there's also a protocol where you follow the very particular steps to cryopreserve them, and also specific steps to store them, which is very much different from what we have learned with semen handling for AI. But still, no, if we just harvested them, just preparing to be frozen, the temperature of these embryos is not very critical.
Now we're going to cover the embryo freezing process. Checking our record, we see that we have a number of embryos ready to freeze.
Okay, so also when you do embryo harvesting and transfer, there are many forms to fill up. Okay, and this is very important, especially if you are in a business that would sell the embryos locally or internationally. No, so you have to follow this internationally recognized form. You put in the number of the embryo, the number of the dam, of course, the hormone estrogen synchronization that was used, and the number of embryos that were harvested, the grading, okay, etc. And of course, no, same as with the AI, when you do the transfer, you also have to record which embryos were which embryos were transferred to this particular animal. No?
The freezing solution we use is a 10% glycerol solution.
Okay, so this is now the third medium that we have encountered. No? First is the flushing medium, second is the holding medium, and now we have the freezing medium. So for the fresh transfer, we will not use the freezing medium anymore. No? Once they have been loaded in the gun, they're good to go. Usually, right after loading, we use the semen straws the embryo straws right away. Okay. So that's why it's good that you have a laboratory technician to do the processing. So the veterinarian, no, when the embryo straws have already been loaded, the veterinarian can proceed with the embryo transfer. And then the laboratory personnel will be left in the facility to arrange for any embryos that have to be frozen.
We would draw up approximately 2 to 3 mils of the 10% glycerol solution using an airtight syringe. we need to filter the solution into the 4-well dish. All 4 wells of this particular dish will contain the same solution, the 10% glycerol. The filter acts to sterilize the solution. Once we have the solution in the dish, we need to label the dish showing that it does contain the glycerol. Our next step is to label the straws. This is a very tedious part of the entire procedure, so we need to do it before we actually start working with the embryos. In this case, we only have 3 straws to label. We begin with the breed code of the particular animal, then the animal's registration number, followed by the straw number. All of the writing needs to be done on the cotton plug-in of the straw, and on the back side, write the embryo freeze code, which identifies the particular company doing the freezing, followed by the date. With this information, we can check back upon the records and determine exactly which embryo was frozen in each straw. Now that the straws are ready, we can actually begin working with the embryos. The embryos are handled using a sterile unipet. The unipet is attached onto the end of a syringe, which has a small piece of rubber tubing attached. By exerting pressure on the rubber tubing, we can cause suction and apply pressure to move the embryos by moving a small volume of fluid within that glass capillary tube. Now we will select the embryos that we want to freeze. Put them into the second well and slowly wash them. Once we've washed them, we put them into the third well and wash them again. This will act to remove any debris that we have from the collection dish that we used. Now we place the embryos into another dish that contains more of the actual collection solution. Once we go into the first well, we're going to wash the embryos. Then we're going to slowly move them down through each succeeding well. Each well contains the exact same sterile solution. We will wash the embryos approximately 10 times. This will ensure that we are not moving any debris from the collection solution, and it also helps in the prevention of disease transmission.
Okay. That being said, this is what we call the trypsinization, no? So we put in trypsin to further wash the embryo. And this is the step that makes it possible for countries, even with FMD, to be able to import embryos to countries without FMD, no? Okay. It's not possible with semen, no? Kasi FMD can be transferred venereally. So we cannot get from countries that that have FMD, no? For example, Brazil, Thailand, no, Japan, they are FMD free now. Pero before, no, we cannot get semen from from Japan. But with embryos, we can. And you see how tedious the process is. We have to repeat this in each of the embryos that we have harvested, no? So it takes a long time. So when we do embryo harvest and transfer, we really have to start early in the morning, and it will, depending on the harvest, now if there's a lot of embryos that we have harvested, it will really end later in the day, even up to nighttime, okay? So it's very exhausting. So that's why when doing this, you have to prepare yourself, mentally, physically, and sometimes depending if the cows are not even cooperative, so it takes a long time to do the harvest. And so sometimes you will really not eat your lunch at the right time, etc. So it's a very special day doing the embryo transfer.
Once the embryos have completed the washing stage, we need to set our timer for 15 minutes. The washed embryos can then be moved back into the unipet and using the glycerol dish, place the embryos into well number 1. This begins the dehydration process. We start our 15-minute timer, slowly wash the embryos around in well number 1, assuring that we're getting a good mix of the solution that we added to it. Then pick up the embryos, move them into well number 2. Once in well number 2, we again wash the embryos. Pick up the embryos and move them into well number 3. Well number 3 is the final well which we will place the embryos. We then take our labeled straws, starting with straw number 1, and attach it to the 1 cc tuberculin syringe. We now go into well number 4 to draw up the first band of solution.
So you see the arms of the doctor here, no? So you have to have a stable hand when you're collecting the embryos. So he increased the stability of his right hand now by anchoring it on the left hand over here. It will be difficult for you to collect the embryos if you have wobbly hands.
A small air band, go into well number 3 and slowly pick up an embryo. Once we get the embryo, a small air band and a final band out of well number 4. We use well number 4 for the first and the last band so that we're sure that we do not accidentally draw up a second embryo.
So this one is the the freezing media and where the embryo is, then air pocket, air pocket, freezing media, and then air pocket. Okay, so you really have to follow this order or this pattern.
We then follow the same procedure on each embryo. Both ends of the straw need to be sealed.
Okay, so this is actually a conventional way of sealing it, but we have like a fancier way now, an ultrasonic sealer, so it doesn't heat up. No, kasi with this one, it heats up. Sometimes it burns the embryo straw, so you don't like that as well. And then if you don't know how to use this properly, so sometimes there's still a leak. So with the ultrasonic sealer, it seals now without the heat. So it's safer to use, ganyan. Of course, it's just more expensive. And then we can also use the semen powder. The semen straw powder that I have mentioned in our face-to-face laboratory class. We can also use that as well.
Only the extreme tip of the straw needs to extend across the heating element. This is a properly sealed straw. Once the straws are sealed, they can be placed near the freezer and wait for the 15-minute timer to go off. The embryo program needs to be checked. The initial temperature is negative.
It was not shown earlier, but after loading the embryo in the embryo straw, before sealing it, you have to check it in the stereo microscope again to make sure that it's really there, okay? Before you seal it. No, so that's the step. And then we have a different kind of freezing chamber as compared to the semen processing, okay? It's just like a small tub. But this one, iba yung kanila eh, parang an oven type, no? It has a different protocols depending on the type of freezing media that you use. So it's already pre-programmed, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you just press it like what you need is 1, and it's going to pre-cool your chamber up to the point when it's already done on the 15 minutes, and it's good for you to freeze them.
Degrees centigrade. It can be adjusted by rotating the knob counterclockwise or back clockwise to get to the desired temperature. The holding temperature will be negative 36 degrees centigrade. The rate will be 0.3 degrees centigrade per minute. While we are waiting for the embryos to equilibrate in the glycerol solution, it's a good time to update your records. A freezing record needs to be filled out for each group of embryos, identifying the particular donor and sire used, the date of freezing, and each individual embryo as far as which straw it is placed in.
So it's different when you have an AI record and an embryo transfer record. Kasi with this one, it's like you're treating one embryo as already an individual. So it has its own record already, no? One embryo, one record.
The records are a very important aspect of the embryo collection procedure. Proper records are the key to a successful program. Is negative 7 degrees centigrade. It's ready to place the embryos into the freezing unit. The embryos need to be placed down into the alcohol bath in an upright position with the cotton plug extending above the level of the alcohol.
So here, in semen processing, you can have several, like even up to 1,000 of straws that you can cryopreserve at the same time. With this one, you are limited with the capacity of your chamber. So the one that we were using before only can freeze up to 36 embryo straws. So that's too few, no? That's too few. That's why this procedure is really a lot more tedious than semen processing.
Sure that the writing does not become washed off in the liquid. Once the embryo straws have been in the freezer for 2 to 3 minutes, we need to induce ice crystal formation using the frozen brass rod. Care should be taken to hold the rod with a paper towel so that you do not burn yourself. Each straw needs to be raised individually, touch the band containing the embryo and the band above it.
Okay, so you only touch the air pocket or the air band, no? So you do not touch anywhere else, especially where you have the embryo, okay? So this will help try to increase the temperature of the embryo straws, but not very much drastic change in the temperature.
That's not a clown. How's that a clown?
If you notice, a small bit of ice crystals will form.
Another strategy to do this is to have a cotton ball submerged in liquid nitrogen, and that's being held by your thumb forceps, no? And then this soaked cotton ball will now touch the air pockets.
This is what we call seeding.
Yeah, so the step that has been demonstrated is what you call seeding. Seed, S-E-E-D-I-N-G.
Once the embryos have been seeded, we need to replace the lid and wait for another 2 to 3 minutes before we start the program. After 2 to 3 minutes, each embryo needs to be checked to ensure that ice crystals have formed. Since we have proper ice crystal formation, we can now start the embryo program by depressing the run button. This will initiate the program and cool down from -7 to -36 degrees centigrade.
So this is an old model of a chamber. The ones that we are using is just like a small cooler, no? Ganito lang siya kalaki. It's as big as this one. So not like this one. This one is too tall. Probably the size is just 1/3 of the one we see right now.
I don't want to get flower.
Now we need to label the canes for the freezing process. On the goblet itself, we need to put the same type of information we have on the straw. Here we have the breed code, in this case is Simmental, the registration number of the donor animal,
No,
followed by the animal's actual number.
not that.
We then put the freeze code of the company, followed by the date.
This is a different way on labeling the canister, no? It's a lot different from
The same information needs to be
straws,
written on the neck of the cane. So we go near the top portion, once again, put the breed code, registration number, and the donor's private herd number. We then put the IETS freeze code for our company and the date.
So for those that are internationally recognized embryo transfer facilities, each of the facility would get a code, and you have to put those code in your canister. Okay, in your cane. So this is your cane. And in the cane, you will get your canister where you will, these are your parang cylinder tubes, no? Where you will put in each of the embryo straws. So each cane can just, I think, you can put a cylinder on the top and another one at the bottom. And about 10 embryo straws can fit in one cylinder tube, no? So about 20 in each cane. So that few, as compared to with the Siemens straws, diba? The canister or the cylinders can hold about 100 plus to 200 Siemens straws at the same time.